You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guest about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Customer experience isn't just be nice. Now that's vital, but it's not everything. CX is human, it's digital, it's physical. When you walk into an experience, be it retail, be it entertainment, be it grocery, the environment affects the experience. Now, we could do an entire episode on how Vegas casinos use all of your senses in the environment to influence your experience there. We don't always think about the physical and visual environment with CX. But today's guest, Daniel Black, founder of Glass Media, thinks about it a lot. Have you ever seen a really cool display in a store? Something with great visuals, creative imagery, intriguing storytelling, something that just captures your attention. That's what Daniel and his team do for clients around the globe. I met Daniel at NRF, remember in-person conferences? A few years ago in New York, and was blown away by the creativity and the technology his company provides. But beyond tech and creativity, Daniel gets customer experience. I can't wait to dive into his thoughts on how to create that amazing physical customer experience that helps companies truly stand out. Daniel, welcome to CX Passport.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rick. I appreciate it.
Glad to have you. This is seeing it and all of that. This one's going to be fun. I can't wait to talk about this. But let's just start kind of with some definitions here. So I imagine not everyone fully understands what visual merchandising is. Let's start there. What is visual merchandising?
So it's very correlated with CX, right? CX is all about people's perceptions and feelings about things. Visual merchandising is largely the same. It's really a marketing discipline or practice where a visual merchandiser is taking floor plans, lighting, displays, technology, and really enhancing the physical retail environment in hopes that, one, of course, you purchase something, but more than that you get this emotional connection to the brand. You build some brand equity, and that's whether you purchase something or not.
So I'm thinking about that visual merchandising space, right? And you did kind of allude to it, and there's emotions and that sort of stuff. But this is a podcast about customer experience. And so how does that visual merchandising, why are we talking about that in the context of CX? How does it really draw and make up that component of customer experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we look at the online space, e-commerce, customer experience oftentimes is more about eliminating friction, right? Yeah. Friction in clicking things, easy checkout. In the physical space, it's not just about what you see, what you smell, what you hear. It's also even about people flow, right? Sometimes you go into stores where there's too many aisles and there's too many people, it's crowded, and you kind of want to get in and out. Visual merchandisers are doing everything from how they set the mannequins, what the mannequins wear, what that vignette looks like. Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of us, anytime we walk into a retail store, the goal is to stop us in our tracks. If we're just going in and we're going straight to aisle B and we know exactly what we want to purchase, there's no upsell, cross-sell opportunity, and it's not very memorable, right? Which is why a lot of grocery stores and convenience stores often actually change up the aisles. Right. So you walk in, you get a little perplexed once in a while. You're like, I thought the bread aisle was aisle 4 and now it's aisle 7. So there's actually a number of even department stores like Target and Walmart that actually do that once in a while to kind of throw us off a little bit.
Yeah. So that's I hadn't thought of it that way, Daniel, because the stuff that you and Glass Media do is in the absolutely like cool vein. And this is an audio podcast. And so, but in the show notes, we're definitely going to guide some folks to how they can see some of these great visuals and some of the exciting things. So that's the sort of irritant side of customer experience. I'm going to move things around and freeze your brain a little bit. But I'm thinking about some of the cool things that you've seen out there and some of the things that you're a part of helping create. And I know we'll talk about destinations and that aspect of it, but in general, kind of this visual merchandising, what are some of the areas that you're playing with?
Yeah, so interactivity is really important, right? So we're now in the physical world. How do you get someone to better leverage their smartphone to actually engage with the display?
Okay.
So, that's something we're seeing. How do you make the smartphone an extension of the display where you might be able to scan a QR code and actually control something? You might be able to get more information on your smartphone. And everyone right now really cares about the whole personalization aspect. So where a lot of retailers going now is if you have a mobile app and you're logged in and you've given them permission, they can actually personalize experiences where they can say, "Hey, Rick, welcome back to store, X, Y, and Z." They can also look at kind of your tastes and preferences and maybe tailor the recommendations to what you've seen before. But the same thing, we're actually doing a lot of work now in kids areas of stores.
Okay.
Kids want to play games. And so there's really neat things we can do with projection, creating a digital game on the ground or on a wall, and using something called gesture recognition. No one needs to physically touch anything anymore. So coming out of the pandemic, it's interesting. Pre-pandemic, it was all about physically touching things, right? Touching product. Mm-hmm. Now a lot of retailers are asking if there's ways to create a more frictionless way to interact with things. And so using computer vision, a lot of companies now are creating interactive digital signage, either using a smartphone or your hands, right? Or something to that effect.
That's interesting. So you're bringing back a memory, and man, I wish I could think of that. It's probably in the realm of almost a decade at this point. But we took a trip, and listeners may be familiar with this one, but so we took a trip to Disney World in Florida, and specifically Epcot, and in the World section, which is great for adults because that's food, that's beverage, that's adult beverages, and we enjoy that part. But the kids, okay, that's great. China, Germany, Japan, thanks. That's fun, Dad and Mom. But what they built was this, and I can't remember the animated character, but an interactive experience for the kids that they gave them what was a mobile phone, but it was obviously a dedicated device for it. And as they went to the different countries, there were missions that they had to unlock that then whatever was happening in there. So the Glockenspiel, the big one that is there in Germany, the kid would be able to control it with the device in their hand. And it was a bit of a mind-blowing moment for them, both the big and then the little small, almost hidden Mickey-esque type things that would happen. So for you to describe now a decade later, this idea of having kids interact and play in the store and build that connection makes a lot of sense to me. And I can see a lot of fun out of that.
Yeah, we refer to it as gamification, right?
Yeah,
everything now is about gamifying the experiences. So whether it's a scavenger hunt, kind of like you're alluding to, or something else, the goal is that, again, how do we make that emotional connection? How do we build a little bit more brand equity and create a unique experience that you can't get somewhere else?
Right. And at that time, I mean, I'm still talking about it a decade plus later. And Disney's known for its magic, and some of the things you create are absolutely magical at that retail space as well. But it also had this sort of, I guarantee that one of the Imagineers realized, hey, if we have the kids really involved in the worlds and there's this path that they go through, guarantee mom and dad are going to buy a snack and a beverage at each one of those countries, whereas they might have just blown right through all of them. So there's a retail, or a transactional and financial component to it as well, not just that, ooh, that's nifty.
Absolutely.
So I did mention that you and I met at NRF, and we know New York continues to be, and this is pandemic aside, we know things will get better, but it's a destination for great and innovative retail. Half of the reason why our team took that trip to New York was both the conference, but then to just travel through great stores. And this is true with Regent Street in London. Cities like Dubai and Hong Kong and other global destinations end up where the retail itself becomes the travel destination. So I know you've traveled a ton. Where are you seeing the retail experience become the destination rather than just this accessory to the trip?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's been a big paradigm shift as of late. And I think it's actually even before we travel now. Right. If you actually look at what's happening with airport retail and high luxury brands moving into airport retail, a lot of these brands are realizing, hey, the average person's in an airport for at least an hour. It's going to be constant traffic, right? Whether it's a pandemic or not, there's millions and millions of people every year going through airports. And so we're starting to see brands like Louis Vuitton, the Harry Potter store, right? Gucci, all of them are doing these really immersive experiential pop-ups in airports. And I think that's been a huge shift for me as I continue to travel. These are unique experiences. You're not going to see them replicated from airport to airport. And I think, the data they're supporting is showing it's building consistent brand equity. I don't know how many people are actually purchasing, right, a multi-$1,000 handbag at an airport, but at the same time, they're really building that brand equity. People are talking about it, and there's definitely been a tremendous ROI.
That's the airport one's interesting. You're actually doing a little talk back unintentionally. I don't know that you realize this, but Misty Cisneros Contreras. I think if I've got that right, it's off memory here. Episode 14 was she leads guest experience at the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and we talked about that airports becoming a destination through that, the retail, the dining, that aspect of it. And so as you're describing that in the airports, and I've seen some of those handbags purchased, but it does tend to be in the Hong Kongs and Dubais. But walk me through that. So how does a brand become a destination? How does a retail store become a destination? What are the things that you're seeing that make that where someone would say, I want to go to that store, not just that city that happens to have that store?
Yes, I'll give you a few real world examples. The first that's fascinating to me is Restoration Hardware. So okay. Restoration Hardware decided, let's do a total rebrand and let's start opening up showcases and showrooms around the country. They just opened one here in Dallas, right? You have a high-end restaurant.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Really, it is a destination, right? Everyone in Dallas talks about it. People love to go there. I think they've been really, really successful in kind of rebranding their physical identity. Second is another trend we're seeing, which is actually mobile stores. So Louis Vuitton's another good example. There's a company in Switzerland that makes watches. A lot of people are now doing kind of these Airstream pop-ups where they'll build a very custom pop-up experience. They'll travel to a different city or a town, and they'll set up shop. And, they'll put seating outside, they'll put a stage and create these really, really cool, immersive pop-up experiences. And I think it's all about scarcity, right? And people just knowing that there's one unique pop-up and it's traveling from city to city. And so if you know it's going to be in your city or it's going to be somewhere nearby, a lot of people are suddenly making that a destination. And they're going to visit, they're going to experience it, they're going to post videos and images on social media. I think that's a trend we're really going to see continue. Yeah, so it's fascinating. And the last thing I'll say on that as well is, limited edition, special edition. A lot of brands too are realizing with supply chain, if they can't make thousands of one item, let's create something a little bit unique. And sell out very quickly, create that scarcity, that demand. And I feel that's working as well.
Well, Daniel, I don't know how much the Airstream is going to have the first class lounge, but I do know this, that you have had plenty of travel. And I do want to shout out somebody here as we enter the first class lounge. Crystal Amaral and I worked together back at Bose, and she was instrumental in doing one of those Airstream trips for Bose. Holy cow, that you're absolutely right. The scarcity, the excitement of it, the rarity of it, those were absolutely genius things. Now, I bet you this. The crew that was behind that trip needed a little first class lounge, but you and I get to step into the first class lounge today, and hopefully we'll move quickly here and have a little bit of fun as we go along the way. So what is a dream travel location from your past?
So for me, it's a little bit interesting. I was one of those people until the age of, I guess, almost 30, had never been on a cruise.
Okay.
So when my wife and I got married, we actually did a cruise for a honeymoon.
Nice.
And we took like a luxury high-end cruise. And so for me, sure, it was about the destinations we were visiting. But for me as an entrepreneur, it's really hard to check out. And so it's really neat to get on a boat, have no Wi-Fi, right? I was one of those people that did not purchase the Wi-Fi package, and just kind of be out in the ocean. And so I remember, waking up every morning, crack of dawn, natural sunlight, just eating an apple on the deck or the patio overlooking the ocean. And said, in a weird way, it would be cruising for me.
That sounds really nice. Now, you mentioned 30s. I'm someone, well, I'll go ahead and be honest here. Hello, listeners. I'm 48 and have never been on a cruise. So I've got you beat there. But it does sound delightful. I have a friend who just took one, and there's pictures that he have of that morning cup of coffee, just looking over the ship into just empty water and how beautiful that is. Well, thinking of that sounds like a glorious trip from your past. What's a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Without question, Ibiza. So
okay. Yes.
Yep. My wife and I, every time we travel over in the Middle East area, we're always like, can we get there? Can we get there before we come back? And so hopefully one of these days it happens.
You're going to have to find some way to, I don't know, have your trips to the Middle East, and maybe Iberia. You fly through there and you have to connect into Spain or something along those lines so that you can get some of that Mediterranean beach going for you. What is now Mediterranean? Beautiful food, beautiful, great things. What is your favorite thing to eat?
I'm a big seafood guy, fresh seafood. We have some of it in Dallas, but it's not the same as being on the coast.
Yeah.
Right. I think my folks are in West Palm Beach, and every time I visit, there's nothing like fresh tuna poke, right, or stone crab claws right from the ocean. So without a question, it's seafood.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, we did it was a snorkeling trip, and they were fishing off of the back and yanked in a tuna and sliced that up and had it right there on the boat. And there's nothing quite like truly fresh seafood. Yes, our airlines fly it in here into landlocked North Texas, Dallas, and yet it's still not the same as the coast. I'm with you there.
Yeah, I was going to interject and say really quickly, one of my favorites was my friend had a bachelor party in Destin, Florida, and we went deep sea fishing. And that was one of the best meals I've ever had. We brought all the fish back, and the restaurant did it 3-way, right? They do it blackened, they do it fried. It was phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, there's some great stuff. The fresh seafood may be the one that is the most spectacular, especially because you can be like, I just yanked this out of the water. This is awesome. Let's go to the flip side. What is a thing your parents forced you to eat, but you hated as a kid?
So for me, my parents never forced me to eat anything, but at the same time, for some reason, when I was young, I was scared of artichokes. And
I can understand that.
Yeah, there were a number of times where it was probably more my sister than my parents, but I kind of was forced to eat an artichoke, and I remember it to this day.
That is a beastly, frightening. To call it even a food item to a kid is shocking. You want me to put that in?
Looking.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That's a weapon, not a food. Daniel, you've traveled a ton. We'll talk about that too. But what is one travel item you will not leave home without?
So I'm pretty risk averse. For me, it's a power bank for my iPhone. My wife's one of those people where her phone's kind of always on 4%. I'm one of those people where if it gets under 60%, I start to panic a little bit. And I've had a number of those, nightmare scenarios where your flight's delayed, things happen, and having a full phone where you can listen to music and check your emails always feels great.
Daniel, back to the visual merchandising. It is great to have fantastic creative visual merchandising, right? But I wonder, is it hard to know when the customer or what the customer actually thinks about what they see? There's the coolness factor, but then what is the customer doing with that? In this world, how do you listen to the customer, know whether what you're doing is effective? And I think too, really, what's the definition of effective here?
Yeah, so I think it's threefold. I think first and foremost is what we refer to as social listening, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's social sharing. You can see people talking about it online, posting photos to Instagram. I think that's very, very important for visual merchandisers, right? There's actually a term now, right? Making something Instagrammable.
Right.
How do you create a space that actually incentivizes or motivates people to actually partake, right? And become one with that experience and share that experience. I think number 2 and 3 really are, you have a qualitative approach and a quantitative approach to everything we do in digital signage. On the quantitative approach, there's things we can look at like footfall, right? So a lot of retailers have foot traffic counters. We can actually look at if we're driving more traffic to the store because we have an immersive digital storefront, right? Or something unique. And then we can look at the point of sale, and we can look at sell-through, category lift. That's kind of the more metric side of things, which is boring, but very, very important. On the flip side, you have the qualitative side of things. And oftentimes it's very important that the visual merchandisers and retailers are not just setting things up, they're actually speaking with customers, right? If they're videotaping it, they're trying to learn, why are they videotaping it? What's so special? What's so cool? They're taking those learnings and they're applying it to, I guess, continually optimize what they're already doing both inside the windows and inside the store.
So there's a couple of things you said in there that really hit me. And one was that Instagrammable. And I'm actually not a overly Instagram type person. That's not kind of what stirs my drink. But even my wife and I were walking through Old Town Scottsdale yesterday, and there was a mural on the wall, And both my wife and I had the same thought of, man, they should have done this and it would be so Instagrammable. And I caught myself going, wait, why on earth am I saying that? So if somebody is layman and not really in that scene and not as an influencer type scene is feeling that way, you're absolutely right. And I can see that. And the second is you talked about that sort of social impact and how that is sort of spoken out. And there's an example that was floating all over LinkedIn and I think in other social media platforms as well. And that was that Zara example that was stunningly beautiful. Now, I'm not sure. I think you and I may have talked about it's whether it was real or not, but the social impact was absolutely real. So, we know that visual merchandising can be amazingly effective to that overall CX delivery. What are some of the barriers to creating great CX for the visual merchandiser?
Yes, that's a great question. First and foremost, there's a lot of organizational silos, so to speak.
Sure.
So what typically happens in digital signage is it's usually the IT department that from behind the scenes controls everything.
Okay.
What does that mean? That means the visual merchandisers don't have any influence into the creative, right? It should be the opposite, right? They should be empowered to leverage digital to bring visual merchandising to life, right? To bridge the gap between physical and digital. And we typically see that as a huge, huge bottleneck for visual merchandisers. I think the second one is your example of Zara, which is great. There's also silos between physical visual merchandisers and the marketers, which are the e-commerce folks.
Okay.
For the Zara example, that was 100% marketing. No visual merchandising people in that entire organization, I can guarantee it, that worked in the store had any influence over what they did with CGI.
Really?
Right? It was a marketing initiative. And they were saying, hey, let's create some buzz. But the visual merchandisers played no part in that. So I think, the difficult thing here is how do you empower visual merchandisers to have more influence over the overall decor and experience in the store? And how do you let them leverage technology? So that's a big thing we're working on currently is right now, when you think of digital signs, you think about a TV on a wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you think about something where it's not modular. It's kind of set it and forget it.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we're trying to work on ways to make things modular where a visual merchandiser has the ability to move a screen, right? Or move a projection.
Right.
And that way they actually can leverage it every time they do planogramming, right? They've kind of reset the store.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's kind of archaic. That TV is on the wall. They can't touch it. They have zero influence over the creative. And so their hands are a little bit tied.
That's one of the things, though, that I like about the things that I've seen you and your company create is it allows for that incredible flexibility. Like some of the things you've shown me, I'm not entirely sure how it happens. And that's great. That's the magic. I don't need to know the scene behind it. But when you're working with a company and when you're working with visual merchandisers, some of the barriers you described, I'd imagine you have some influence or try to have some influence in breaking those down. How are you helping kind of break some of those down so that you have that massive impact of some of the really cool things that I see come out of your world?
Yeah, first and foremost for us, all of our solutions are powered by a 4G LTE network. What that means is we don't run Ethernet cable and we don't piggyback on the in-store Wi-Fi. It's very important because if we do, you get into the IT protocols, the firewall changes, and then IT gets to control everything. So for us, we're partnered with AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. We have our own network. And what that means is we don't need to talk to them. So now we can spend all our time really working with the visual merchandisers on what they want to see happen. Second is, a lot of these retailers have large agencies of record, right? Like WPP, Publicis, Omnicom, that do a lot of their marketing. For us, if we can stay in the visual merchandising space, and like I said, give them influence over the creative, if we can stay and create our own little bubble, we find that we have a lot of autonomy over what we do. And that's really the win-win.
Yeah, so I see it's kind of both a mixture of, hey, let's break down some of the silos, but actually let's leverage those silos by we're going to go play in our own sandbox and be able to be as creative as we want to in our own sandbox. There's some genius there. Now, I know we talked about the pandemic a little bit before, and we're still trying to find our way out of it, sadly, but I know that we will find our way out of it. We know that things will get better. So I imagine you're already starting to see some things post-pandemic. People are saying the mall is dead, but is that true? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so the mall is very much alive. I'll give you a quick summary of kind of what's happening with the mall. So There's what we refer to as Class A, B, and C malls. Class A mall is over $500 per square foot. B is between $300 and $500, and a Class C mall is under $300 per square foot. What we're going to see is almost all the Class C malls over the next 5 years are going to be eradicated. They're all going to become, basically zoned for housing, right, and apartments. On the flip side, we're seeing the Class A malls that have really morphed themselves into destinations and just kind of multi-use spaces being extremely successful. So you look at North Park Mall here in Dallas, one of the top 5 malls in the entire country.
Right.
Class A malls are basically going to gobble up the B's and the C's. And so I think that's really the future, and that's good because we're seeing a lot more innovation coming out of these malls. It's not just the restaurants they're putting in there, but they're really kind of gamifying their space and making it a destination where people want to go. And tying to what we were talking about earlier, it's not just people from Dallas. It's people that are coming to visit any part of Texas. Oftentimes they'll say, hey, I want to go visit North Park Mall, or let's try and go through Dallas so we can go there. So I think we're going to see that. And then when you talk about store retrofits and renovations, it's all about CX now, right? Everyone's getting out of their bad leases. They're closing their low performing stores. And at the same time, they're going to invest in the stores that are doing well. And so I'm really excited about the future. I think, like I said, there's probably only going to be 300 core Class A properties in the entire country, not thousands. That's really where these retailers are going to play, aside from the airports, aside from these travel experiences, like we talked about. But I think the future of physical retail is still very exciting. And I think it's only going to get more exciting as the investment kind of meets demand.
Yeah, this is great. Well, and it is encouraging to folks like you and me who have an affiliation with and have enjoyed the retail space in the past. It's not dead, right? And that's the classic quote, right? Retail's not dead. Boring retail is. And we're going to see that. So Daniel, we are sadly out of time, but I thank you so much for joining on CX Passport today. How can people get in touch with you? Where can people see some of the cool things that you're putting out there? What's a way for people to get in touch and learn more about you and your company?
Yeah, so in most of the Class A malls around the country, if you see anything cool, I'm hoping it does tie back to us. Our website is digitalstorefront.com. So if you want to visit us there, drop us a line if we can help you in any way. And like I said, our goal, you'll be seeing this holiday season, a ton of our stuff throughout the country. So we're pretty excited.
That's awesome. Daniel, thanks so much for being on the show today. Yeah, I've learned a ton. I've enjoyed hearing your stories. I have an even greater appreciation for the visual merchandiser. Absolutely. Thanks so much for being on the show. Daniel, I hope you have a wonderful and fulfillingly creative day the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me on, Rick. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX4CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX4CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.